We're going to talk today about pricing, which, as you know, is not black and white. There's no exact equation I can give you, but we're going to talk a little bit about how to price your projects. Now, our Freelance Success Framework students know that we go really deep into it in the course, get real specific. So we're going to talk a little bit high level, and we're going to go a little bit faster than we do in the course because obviously I don't have hours and hours with you. But I still want to give you some ideas, some thoughts about how to go about pricing your project. And in general too, by the way, it's almost always going to make more sense to at least start out with a client working on a project basis. That way your client knows what the what they're going to end up paying at the end of it, what the result is going to be and what they're going to end up paying, versus they know what the result's going to be, but when you're working on an hourly basis, they only have kind of a general idea maybe of what the actual end price is going to be. So generally it's going to make more sense to bill clients or at least propose to clients projects and project fees, at least initially. Again, big topic. We go much deeper in the FSF. But the place to start out with when you're pricing a project, first of all, is you need to have some idea of what your hourly rate is. Again, you're not going to be pricing by the hourly rate, but you're going to use it to figure out your project rate. And your hourly rate, you should do a little bit of research. You should do some research to find out how much people are making for your level of experience. And you know your level of experience. You know whether you're new to the industry, whether you are kind of at a medium point, or whether you are definitely a senior in the industry. Do some research. Find out what people are making for salaries, and then divide that by 20/80, 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, to see what those hourly numbers come up to be. Now, you definitely want to bump that up by at least 20%, since you'll make more as a freelancer, but that can be a good place to start. One tip: do not use those salary calculators online. Those are wildly off from all experience I've ever seen. So skip those. Do your own research. And, too, if you're not seeing salaries online, look at job postings where they post the salary. You can also call up recruiters and say, hey, what salaries are you seeing for this kind of role, for an on-staff Pinterest manager? And then when you find out what that on-staff number is, again, divide it by what that salary is, divided by 20/80, and then multiply it by at least 120%. So that's, and you want to do that with a couple of different salaries so you get a good ballpark. Once you know your standard hourly rate, maybe your base hourly rate, the lowest you're willing to go, then you need to really make sure you have a good understanding of the project. Before you can quote anything to a potential client, you need to have a really in-depth conversation with them about exactly what the project is going to entail. Sometimes clients will say, well, I want you to manage my Pinterest account for 6 months. How much is that going to cost? There's no way to even begin to price that out until you understand what they mean by managing the Pinterest account, what you mean by managing the Pinterest account. So you have to have a really good understanding of the project, and don't ever be afraid to ask questions. Remember that clients don't know how to be clients, and because they don't know the best questions to ask, almost always the first question they're going to ask is how much it's going to cost. That does not mean that is the first thing you have to answer, because often you can't answer it because you don't know enough about the project. So I feel like I'm talking really fast. Good thing this is recorded. Go back and watch it again. But once you have a good understanding of the project and everything it's going to entail, then you can go back and start figuring things out based on your previous experience. First of all, how long do you think it's going to actually take you to accomplish the tasks of the project? That's part one, right? And then how much meeting time are you expecting? There's at least going to be a kickoff meeting, probably a review or two as you go along. If you let your clients get in touch with you and ask questions, factor that in as well. If it's one-time deliverable, it's very likely that there are going to be some changes. You deliver something and they go, oh, this is great. Here are just a couple other things we'd like you to incorporate, which is natural. That's what there should be because it's a collaborative process. Factor in some time for any revisions, that kind of thing. But go through and figure out all of the different elements that, all of the different processes and all of the different deliverables that you're going to have to put together in this project. And you have to figure out each one of them individually. You know, if it's like Pinterest management for 6 months, don't just guess and say, gosh, maybe that'd be 20 hours worth of time. No. Instead, go back and say, okay, well, Pinterest management is going to involve first an analysis of what they currently have on their account and their everything that they have set up now. That's going to take me 2.5 hours. Okay, then I'm going to have to put together a comprehensive plan for them. That's going to take another 2 hours. Then I'm going to have to review the plan with them. That's going to take an hour. Then executing the plan is going to take 8 hours or whatever. But break down each individual part of this project, whether, again, I'm using Pinterest management, for example, but you know that we talk to freelancers in every field. But this is just an example. But break down each individual piece, each individual part of a project. Then once you have each individual piece and you know how long each is going to take you, what is the total amount of time? So, you know, maybe it's a 22-hour project. The beginning to end, you're not going to do it straight through, of course, but beginning to end, the project is probably going to take 22 hours of your time. And make sure to factor in time for revisions. Make sure to factor in time for meetings. Make sure you should be paid for all of that stuff. But so let's say hypothetically, you figure all of that out and it's going to be about 22 hours. Then, because you've already figured out your hourly rate, multiply that hourly rate by the number of hours that you think this project is going to take you. And that is going to give you a good ballpark for a reasonable price for this project. Now, there may be some other factors you want to factor in. For example, does the client want it really fast? You know, is it a fast track? Are you going to have to maybe set aside other projects or cancel plans with friends or that kind of thing to do this for them? If that's the case, if it's a rush project, it's reasonable to make it a little bit more expensive. Now, you don't have to specifically say, here's your rush fee, but it's reasonable to make it a little bit more expensive because it's a rush project. Or if you think that this client is going to need a little bit more hand-holding than your average client, then you want to factor that in as well. Make sure that, you know, no two clients are going to be the same. No two projects are going to be the same. Each one is going to be unique, and each one should have it doesn't necessarily need a unique price, but you should take the time to figure out the price for each project, because things like the client's level of understanding can factor into it, timelines, all kinds of other things. If you're completely new to maybe the industry and you're going to need to do more research time, factor that in as well. Because you need to make sure, or again, it's not an exact science, but as close as possible, you want to get to a number that you go, yes, if I made that for this project, based on what I know, based on what my goal hourly rate is, and based on how long I think it's going to take me, then I would be comfortable working at this price. Then that is probably a very good price to propose to your client. Now, I always recommend too that you have an idea of the lowest you would do a price for. Now, the lowest might be that price that you are giving them. That might be like, that's it. If they can't pay this price, I'll move on and go to the next client. There are plenty of freelancers who will do that. Or you might say, well, you know, I'm just ramping up, or I'd really like to work with this client. If they really can't pay this price, I could do it for X amount. Any lower than that, it's not going to be worth it to me. And I want you to have that number in the back of your mind, just in case they come back and say, well, that's too expensive. Now, if they come back and say, yeah, it's too expensive, I don't want you to say, well, then what about X price, your lowest price? No. Instead, if they come back and say, wow, that's too expensive, you say, no, you know, I understand. There might be some wiggle room. What is your budget for this project? And if they give a budget that's above your absolute lowest price, then great, go with their budget. Say, you know what, I could make that work. I have to move some stuff around, but I could make that work. If you want to move forward, we can do it for that price. Or if their budget is just below what you are willing to work for, then you know it, and you move on to the next client and you say, you know what, I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense for me to do this amount of work for that price. If your budget changes in the future, I definitely would love to work with you, but it doesn't make sense for me, which is fair and honest and true, right? So again, very high level and very quickly through our Freelance Success Framework students, as I was saying, know that we go in much greater depth and I don't talk nearly as fast in the course itself. But for those of you who are kind of like, I don't even know where to begin when it comes to project price, I wanted to give you just a high level look at it, and at least a first couple of things to think about as you are exploring the idea of freelancing and exploring the idea of pricing projects. So there you go.